The gunshot echoed across the plains of southern Utah Territory like a thunderclap, startling Amelia Vance from her work in the garden. Spring of 1875 had arrived in Monticello with unexpected warmth, coaxing her early plantings from the soil weeks ahead of schedule. She wiped her brow with a dirt-stained hand, squinting toward the horizon where a cloud of dust signaled riders approaching. That single shot wasn't unusual in these parts, but something about it set her nerves on edge. At 28, Amelia had grown accustomed to the rhythms of frontier life. 3 years a widow after her husband's mining accident, she had learned to manage the small homestead on her own, though managing often meant barely surviving from season to season. The drought last summer had nearly been her undoing. This year promised better, but promises in this harsh country were worth less than water in a dried-up creek bed. The riders were close enough now that she could make out 3 figures. 2 men supporting a third slumped between them. Trouble. Amelia quickly tucked her gardening tools under the porch and smoothed her apron, instinctively checking that the small derringer her late husband had insisted she keep was still in its hidden pocket. "Madam," the lead rider called out while still some distance away. "Need help, man's been shot." Amelia's hands moved automatically to clear the kitchen table as the riders pulled into her yard. She had assisted the town doctor enough times to know basic treatment for gunshot wounds. In Monticello, where the nearest real doctor was in Moab, 40 miles north, such skills were essential. "Bring him in," she called, pushing open the door. The 2 men half carried, half dragged their companion inside. One was tall, lanky with a shock of sandy hair under a battered hat. The other was shorter, stockier, with a graying beard. Both wore the dust-covered, practical clothing of cattle drovers. The wounded man between them was unconscious, blood soaking through a makeshift bandage on his left shoulder. "What happened?" Amelia demanded, already gathering clean cloths and setting water to boil. "Rustlers," said the taller man, removing his hat. "We was moving a small herd north when they hit us. Beau took a bullet meant for me." Amelia glanced at the unconscious man with new interest. His face was tanned and weathered with several days' growth of beard, but handsome in a rugged way. A shock of dark brown hair fell across his forehead. "Lay him there," she directed, pointing to the table. "And you are?" "Thomas Riley, madam. This here's Joe Wilkins. The man bleeding all over your table is Beau Drummond. We're moving cattle from Arizona Territory up to Salina." Amelia worked quickly, cutting away the blood-soaked shirt to examine the wound. The bullet had gone clean through the fleshy part of the shoulder. A mercy, though the blood loss was concerning. "Hand me that whiskey," she instructed, nodding toward a bottle on a high shelf. As she cleaned and dressed the wound, she asked, "Your herd?" "His," Joe replied, nodding toward the unconscious man. "Beau's been building up a ranch about 15 miles west of here. Monticello's the nearest settlement." "I know where I live, Mr. Wilkins," Amelia said dryly. "What I didn't know was that someone was ranching out in Dry Valley. That's hard country." "Harder than most, but Beau Drummond ain't like most men," Thomas said with obvious admiration. "Made something out of nothing out there, got himself 7 kids to feed, too." Amelia's hands faltered momentarily. 7 children, where's their mother? A shadow crossed Thomas's face. "Past 2 winters back. Fever took her quick-like. Beau's raised those young'uns on his own since." Amelia's gaze returned to the wounded man, seeing him differently now. 7 children. No wonder he was risking his life moving cattle through rustler territory. Her late husband had wanted children desperately, but their 3 years together had yielded nothing. The town gossips whispered it was her fault that she was barren, and in her darkest moments, Amelia feared they were right. "He'll need rest," she said, finishing the bandaging. "And I don't imagine you want to move him far. He can stay here tonight." "Madam, that's mighty generous, but we can't leave the herd unattended for long," Joe worried. "Then go back to it. I've tended wounded men before." The 2 cowboys exchanged glances. "If you're certain." "I am. Where is this herd now?" "About 3 miles south, tucked into a draw with good water," Thomas explained. We scattered the rustlers, but they might regroup. Then you'd best get back. Your boss will be safe here. After they left with profuse thanks and promises to return the next day, Amelia sat beside the unconscious stranger, studying his face. 7 children without a mother. The thought twisted something inside her, a yearning she generally kept buried beneath practicality and daily survival. It was nearly sunset when Beau Drummond's eyes fluttered open. Confusion gave way to alarm as he tried to sit up, grimacing with pain. "Easy," Amelia said, placing a firm hand on his uninjured shoulder. "You've been shot, Mr. Drummond. Your men brought you to my homestead. I'm Amelia Vance." His eyes, a startling blue against his tanned skin, focused on her. "The herd, safe, according to your men. They've gone back to guard it." He relaxed slightly but remained tense. "My children are where exactly?" Amelia asked. "At home with Mrs. Gunderson, our housekeeper. But she's expecting me back within the week." His voice was deep but strained with pain and worry. "Well, you won't be riding for at least a few days," Amelia stated matter-of-factly. "That shoulder needs time to start healing." Beau Drummond closed his eyes briefly, his jaw tight. When he opened them again, there was resolve there. "I appreciate your help, Mrs. Vance, but I can't impose. I'll be on my way tomorrow." Amelia crossed her arms. "You'll tear that wound open and bleed to death before you reach your herd, let alone your children. Is that what you want them to hear? That their father died from stubbornness?" A flicker of something surprise, perhaps respect, crossed his face. "You're direct, Mrs. Vance." "Life out here doesn't reward indirectness, Mr. Drummond." She poured a cup of water and helped him drink. "Your men told me about your wife. I'm sorry." His face tightened. "Thank you." 7 children is a lot for one man to manage, she ventured. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Some days I think it's impossible, other days," he trailed off. "They're good children, they've had to grow up fast." Amelia nodded, understanding more than he knew. "Rest now. We'll figure out tomorrow when it comes." But tomorrow brought complications neither expected. Dawn revealed 3 riders watching the homestead from a distant ridge, almost certainly the rustlers regrouping. By mid-morning, Thomas and Joe returned with news that half the herd had been run off in the night. "They must have circled back around us," Joe explained, his face grim. "We managed to keep about 30 head, but they got the rest, tracks heading southeast." Beau, pale but determined to sit at Amelia's table, slammed his fist down in frustration. "Those cattle represent everything I've worked for these past 5 years. We could go after them," Thomas suggested. 2 against how many?" Beau shook his head. "And I'm in no condition to help." Amelia, who had been quietly listening while preparing a stew, spoke up. "The sheriff in Monticello might help." Beau gave a humorless laugh. "Sheriff Davis is barely competent to break up saloon fights, let alone track rustlers across the territory." "Then what about the Ranchers Association? Couldn't they send men? By the time they organized, those cattle would be across the border or butchered." Beau ran his good hand through his hair in frustration. "Without those cattle, I can't make the payment on my land without the land." He didn't need to finish. Amelia understood the precariousness of frontier existence all too well. "What if we sent word to your ranch?" she suggested. "Are there men there who could help?" "Just my older boys, and they're needed to keep things running," Beau answered, then paused. "Though Daniel is 17 now. He's as good with tracking as any man I know." A plan began to form. Joe would continue guarding the remaining cattle. Thomas would ride to Beau's ranch with a message, bringing back Beau's oldest son and perhaps another ranch hand. Meanwhile, Amelia would nurse Beau back to enough strength that he could at least ride. "It's asking too much," Beau protested when Amelia outlined this plan. "You've already done more than most would." "Consider it neighborly duty," Amelia replied, though truth be told, she was surprising herself with this involvement. Since her husband's death, she had deliberately kept her distance from entanglements with others. Something about this man's plight, and perhaps the 7 children depending on him, had broken through her careful isolation. After Thomas departed for Beau's ranch, and Joe returned to the herd, the homestead fell quiet. Beau, despite his protests, was too weak to do much more than rest in Amelia's small sitting room. Amelia found herself strangely aware of his presence, this stranger who had disrupted her solitary life. "Tell me about your children," she said that evening as they shared a simple supper. "Seven seems." She searched for a diplomatic word. "Overwhelming," Beau suggested with a wry smile. "It is sometimes." "I was going to say blessed," Amelia corrected quietly. Something in her tone made him look at her more closely. "You have none of your own." Amelia shook her head, focusing on her plate. "My husband and I, it wasn't meant to be, it seems. I'm sorry." His voice held genuine sympathy. After a moment he continued, "Daniel's my oldest, as I mentioned. 17 and thinks he knows everything, but he's got a good head on his shoulders. Then there's Michael, 15, serious as a judge. The twins, Sarah and Samuel, are 12, complete opposites in personality but inseparable. Emma's 9, smart as a whip. Joshua is 7, and little Grace just turned 4. As he spoke of each child, his face softened, the worry lines easing. Amelia found herself drawn to his obvious love for his family. "How do you manage?" she asked. "With the ranch and all of them?" "Mrs. Gunderson is a godsend. She came to help after Elizabeth, my wife, passed. She's getting on in years herself, but she keeps us all in line." His expression clouded. "The ranch was Elizabeth's dream as much as mine. She grew up on one in Texas, wanted our children to have that life. And now you might lose it," Amelia said softly. Beau's jaw tightened. "I've faced worse odds." Over the next 2 days, an unexpected companionship developed between them. As Amelia tended his wound, which was healing cleanly, they shared stories of their lives. Beau told her of his years as a Union soldier during the war, his wanderings afterward, meeting Elizabeth in Colorado, and their dream of building a cattle ranch in Utah Territory. Amelia spoke of her childhood in Pennsylvania, her journey west with her husband John seeking silver in the mountains, and her struggle to maintain the homestead after his death. "Why stay?" Beau asked her on the 3rd evening. "This is hard country for a woman alone." Amelia paused in her mending. "Where would I go? Back east to be a poor relation. At least here I answer to no one but myself." "Independence at the cost of isolation," Beau observed. "Says the man who chose to ranch in the most remote valley he could find," she countered with a raised eyebrow. He chuckled, then winced as the movement jarred his shoulder. "Fair point, Mrs. Vance." "Amelia," she corrected. "After 3 days of bleeding on my linens, I think you've earned the right to use my given name." "Amelia," he repeated, his voice warming the syllables in a way that brought unexpected color to her cheeks. "Then I'm Beau, not Mr. Drummond." The moment was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. Beau tensed, reaching for a gun that wasn't there. Amelia quickly retrieved her derringer from its hiding place and moved to the window. "It's Thomas," she reported with relief, "and there are 2 others with him." One was clearly a younger version of Beau, tall for his age with the same set to his shoulders. The other was an older man, grizzled but straight-backed in the saddle. Beau struggled to his feet, accepting Amelia's steadying hand on his good arm. "Daniel," he murmured, "and that's Harvey, my foreman." The reunion between father and son was brief but emotional. Daniel, attempting manly restraint but betrayed by the sheen in his eyes, gripped his father's good hand tightly. "Mrs. Gunderson said to tell you she's keeping everyone in line, but to hurry home because Grace keeps asking for you." Harvey, the foreman, was more direct. "You look like hell, boss." "Feel like it too," Beau admitted. "Did Thomas fill you in?" Daniel nodded, his young face hardening. "We'll get those cattle back. Not alone you won't," Beau cautioned. "That's why I brought Harvey, and Thomas said Joe's still with what's left of the herd." 4 men against who knows how many rustlers. Those aren't odds I like, Beau said grimly. 5, Amelia interjected from where she stood by the stove, pouring coffee for the new arrivals. All eyes turned to her in surprise. "I can ride and shoot," she continued calmly. "And I know this territory better than any of you." "Absolutely not," Beau said firmly. "It's too dangerous." Amelia set the coffee pot down with deliberate care. Mr. Drummond, Beau, I've faced blizzards, drought, and fever alone. I've fought off wolves and bandits from this very homestead. I am not some delicate flower needing protection. Daniel looked from his father to Amelia with undisguised interest. Harvey hid a smile behind his coffee cup. Thomas wisely kept his gaze on the floor. It's not about your capabilities, Beau argued. It's about unnecessary risk. Is it unnecessary if it helps you keep your ranch? Keep a home for your children? Amelia challenged. Something shifted in Beau's expression, recognition, perhaps, that her motives ran deeper than mere neighborly assistance. Before he could respond, Harvey cleared his throat. If we're going to track these rustlers, we need to move at first light, the foreman said pragmatically. The trail gets colder every hour. Plans were made over Amelia's hearty stew. Thomas would return to relieve Joe at guarding the remaining cattle. Harvey, Daniel, and Amelia would track the rustlers, hoping to locate the stolen herd before attempting a recovery. Beau, much to his frustration, would remain at Amelia's homestead to continue healing. 2 days, he instructed his son. If you find them, you come back here with the information. No heroics. Daniel nodded, though Amelia noticed a stubborn set to his jaw that reminded her strikingly of his father. That night, after the others had settled in the barn, Amelia found Beau standing on her porch, staring up at the star-filled sky. His left arm was still bound in a sling, but he was steadier on his feet now. You should be resting, she said, joining him. Can't sleep, he admitted. Sending my boy after cattle thieves, it doesn't sit right. He seems capable, he is, but he's also 17 and eager to prove himself. Beau sighed. After Elizabeth died, I promised myself I'd keep them all safe. An impossible promise for any parent, Amelia observed softly. Life doesn't allow it. Beau turned to look at her, his face shadowed in the moonlight. You'd have made a good mother, Amelia Vance. The simple statement hit her with unexpected force. She looked away, blinking back sudden tears. We'll never know, I suppose. I'm sorry, he said quickly. I've spoken out of turn. No, she assured him. It's just, my husband wanted children very badly. When none came, he was devastated. The neighbors whispered it was my fault. She gave a small, bitter laugh. As if such things are ever so simple to assign blame. People talk because they have nothing better to do, Beau said with quiet anger on her behalf. I've seen how you care for this place, for a stranger bleeding on your doorstep. That tells me more about you than any gossip. His words warmed something in her that had been cold for too long. They stood in companionable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead, until the chill night air finally drove them inside. At dawn, Amelia dressed in her most practical riding clothes, sturdy trousers usually hidden beneath skirts, a flannel shirt, and a weathered leather vest. She braided her chestnut hair tightly and tucked it under a wide-brimmed hat. The derringer went into one pocket, a hunting knife into another. Beau watched her preparations with a mixture of admiration and concern. Harvey will look out for you, he said as she checked her rifle's action. He's been with me since I started the ranch. I'll look out for myself, she replied without rancor, but thank you for the concern. The 3 riders departed as the sun crested the eastern mesas, following the trail Thomas had marked the previous day. Amelia didn't look back, though she felt Beau's eyes on her until they crested the first ridge. Daniel proved to be as skilled a tracker as his father had claimed. The rustlers had made little effort to hide their trail, confident in their head start and knowledge that Beau was injured. By midday, Harvey's experienced eye estimated they'd narrowed the gap considerably. They're heading for the canyons, Amelia observed as they paused to rest the horses. If they get the cattle into that maze, we'll never find them. Then we push harder, Daniel said, his young face determined. They rode until dusk, making camp in a sheltered hollow. As they sat around a small, carefully banked fire, Amelia found Daniel studying her with curious intensity. Something on your mind? She asked directly. The boy flushed but held her gaze. Pa doesn't usually trust strangers. But he trusts you. Amelia considered this. We've had little choice but to trust each other these past days. It's more than that, Daniel insisted. He looks at you different, Harvey coughed pointedly from across the fire. Maybe ease up on the personal observations, Daniel. The boy subsided, but Amelia's thoughts were set in motion. Had Beau looked at her differently? And more unsettling, had she looked at him differently too? The next morning brought them to the edge of canyon country, where the land dropped away in a series of red sandstone mazes. The cattle tracks were clear now, heading down a narrow trail that descended into the labyrinth below. This is deliberate, Harvey observed grimly. They're taking them somewhere specific. There's an old trading post about 10 miles in, Amelia suggested. Abandoned now, but it would make a good place to hold stolen cattle before moving them south across the border. You think that's their plan? Daniel asked. It's what I'd do, she replied. Hold them a few days until any pursuit gives up, then move them in small groups to Mexico. They descended carefully into the canyon, alert for any sign of lookouts. The trail narrowed dangerously in places, barely wide enough for a horse with a sheer drop to one side. Amelia led the way, familiar with the treacherous terrain from previous hunting expeditions. It was mid-afternoon when they heard the lowing of cattle echoing off the canyon walls. Harvey signaled for them to dismount and proceed on foot. Creeping to the edge of a rocky outcropping, they looked down into a natural amphitheater where the stolen cattle were penned by temporary fencing. 6 men lounged around a campfire, rifles within easy reach. The old trading post Amelia had mentioned stood at the far end, its adobe walls crumbling but still substantial. We need to get back and tell Pa, Daniel whispered. Agreed, Harvey nodded. Too many for us to take on directly. As they retreated to their horses, Amelia's mind raced with potential strategies. Even with Beau, they would still be outnumbered. They needed an advantage. The ride back to her homestead was tense with urgency. They arrived well after dark to find Beau pacing anxiously on the porch. You found them? He asked immediately, his relief at seeing them safe evident in his voice. Over a hastily prepared meal, they outlined what they'd discovered. Beau listened intently, his mind clearly working through options. We'll need to create a diversion, he concluded. Draw some of them away from the cattle. How's your shoulder? Harvey asked bluntly. Beau rotated it cautiously. Well enough to ride, well enough to shoot if I must. We're still outnumbered, Amelia pointed out, and they'll be expecting pursuit by now. Which is why we need to do something unexpected. Beau's eyes gleamed with a plan forming. How well do you know those canyons, Amelia? Like the back of my hand. I've hunted there for years. Is there another way into that amphitheater, a way they might not be watching? Amelia considered, mentally mapping the terrain. There's a slot canyon that connects about a quarter-mile south. It's narrow, barely wide enough for cattle to pass through single file, but it comes out behind the trading post. They'd never expect an approach from that direction. Perfect, Beau nodded. Here's what we do. The plan was daring but not foolhardy. Harvey and Daniel would create a distraction at the main entrance, making enough noise to draw some of the rustlers away. Meanwhile, Beau and Amelia would come through the slot canyon and open the cattle pen. With any luck, the resulting stampede would create enough chaos for them to drive at least some of the herd back through the slot canyon before the rustlers could regroup. Thomas and Joe can help us round them up once we get them out, Beau finished. It could work, Harvey agreed cautiously. It will work, Daniel asserted with youthful confidence. Amelia caught Beau's eye across the table. It's risky, she said quietly. Everything worth doing out here is, he replied. They set out before dawn, Beau moving stiffly but determined. His color was better, and the wound showed no signs of infection, a testament to Amelia's careful nursing. As they rode, he kept pace beside her, occasionally glancing her way with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. What? She finally asked after the third such look. Just thinking that a week ago I'd never heard the name Amelia Vance. Now I'm riding into danger with you to save my livelihood. Life has strange turns, she agreed. I'm grateful, he said simply. Whatever happens. The sentiment warmed her, but she only nodded in acknowledgement, focusing on the trail ahead. They separated as planned near the canyon entrance. Harvey and Daniel would wait an hour before creating their diversion, giving Beau and Amelia time to position themselves at the slot canyon exit. The passage was as narrow as Amelia had described in places. They had to dismount and lead the horses single file through the towering sandstone walls. "How did you discover this place?" Beau asked quietly as they navigated the winding passage. "By accident. I was tracking a wounded deer and followed it in here." Amelia's voice echoed slightly off the high walls. "I've used it since when hunting. Few know it exists." They emerged precisely where Amelia had predicted, behind the crumbling trading post, with a clear view of the cattle pen and the rustlers' camp. 4 men were visible, 2 playing cards while 2 others kept a desultory watch on the herd. The other 2 were presumably patrolling the main entrance. "Perfect," Beau whispered. They tethered their horses in the shadow of the building and crept closer, taking cover behind fallen adobe bricks. The wait seemed interminable. Beau checked his pocket watch repeatedly. Finally, just as the hour mark passed, gunshots echoed from the canyon entrance, followed by shouting. The effect was immediate. 3 of the rustlers grabbed rifles and ran toward the commotion, leaving just 1 man guarding the cattle. Beau and Amelia exchanged a quick glance better than they'd hoped for. "Now," Beau mouthed. They moved swiftly across the open ground. Amelia headed for the makeshift gate of the cattle pen while Beau circled toward the remaining guard. The man spotted Beau just as he reached the edge of the pen and raised his rifle, but Beau was faster. A single shot dropped the rustler where he stood. Amelia pulled the pins securing the gate and flung it wide. "Ha!" she shouted, waving her hat at the nearest steers. "Get up, go." The cattle, already agitated by the distant gunfire, needed little encouragement. The first few bolted through the opening, and the rest followed in a thundering mass. Beau directed them toward the slot canyon entrance while Amelia continued to urge the stragglers forward. From the direction of the main canyon entrance came more gunfire. Harvey and Daniel were keeping the other rustlers occupied. But it wouldn't last long once they realized the cattle were being stolen right under their noses. "Amelia, time to go," Beau called urgently. She turned to join him just as a shot kicked up dust at her feet. One of the rustlers had returned and was now firing from the top of the trading post wall. Amelia dove for cover behind a water trough as more bullets thudded around her. Beau returned fire, forcing the rustler to duck. "Make for the horses," he shouted. Amelia ran in a crouch toward where their mounts were tethered, Beau providing covering fire. Just as she reached the horses, a cry of pain made her whirl around. Beau was down, clutching his leg. Without hesitation, Amelia drew her derringer and fired twice at the rustler on the wall. Her aim was true. The man toppled forward, falling in a heap to the ground below. "Beau," she ran to him, heart pounding. "Where are you hit?" "Just grazed," he grimaced, pulling himself up with her help. "But this day is determined to fill me with holes, it seems." Relief made her almost light-headed. "Can you ride?" "Have to, don't I?" He managed a tight smile. They mounted quickly. Most of the cattle were already moving through the slot canyon, their instinct to follow the leaders serving the plan perfectly. Beau and Amelia brought up the rear, alert for pursuit, but the remaining rustlers were caught between 2 problems: the cattle theft and Harvey and Daniel's continued harassment from the main entrance. The narrow passage slowed the cattle's progress, but it also made them impossible to outflank. By the time they emerged from the other side, Thomas and Joe had arrived as planned to help guide the herd. Daniel and Harvey appeared shortly after, flushed with success and minor powder burns but otherwise unharmed. "We got them all riled up," Daniel reported gleefully. They were so busy shooting at ghosts they didn't realize what was happening until half the cattle were gone. "They'll figure it out soon enough," Harvey cautioned. "We need to keep moving." With experienced hands now guiding them, the recovered cattle, nearly all of the stolen herd, were driven steadily northward. away from the canyons and back toward the route they'd originally been taking. Beau, despite his fresh injury, kept pace, though Amelia noticed the tightness around his eyes that betrayed his pain. When they finally made camp that night, well away from the canyon country, Amelia insisted on examining his leg. The bullet had indeed only grazed him, but it had left a nasty furrow along his outer thigh. "You're collecting wounds at an alarming rate, Mr. Drummond," she commented as she cleaned and bandaged the injury. "Just giving you opportunities to practice your nursing skills, Mrs. Vance," he replied, his voice strained but his eyes warm with something that made her pulse quicken. Daniel, observing this exchange from across the campfire, nudged Harvey knowingly. The foreman merely rolled his eyes at the boy's lack of subtlety. The next day brought them to the remaining cattle that Joe had been guarding. The combined herd now numbered nearly what Beau had started, with a remarkable recovery that put new energy in all of them, despite their exhaustion. 3 more days to the ranch, Beau estimated as they set up camp that evening. "We'll need to keep a sharp watch. Those rustlers might regroup." "They're licking their wounds," Harvey disagreed. "We sent them running with their tails between their legs. They won't try again, not with this herd." As the others settled in for the night, Amelia found herself keeping watch alongside Beau. His leg was propped awkwardly to ease the pain, but his eyes remained alert, scanning the darkened prairie around them. "You should rest," she told him. "I can take first watch." "I'm not sure I could sleep anyway," he admitted. "Too much thinking to do." "About what?" he hesitated. "About what comes next, for you." Amelia blinked, surprised by the direction of his thoughts. "What do you mean? You've been away from your homestead for days now. Will it be safe?" "Will you be safe going back there alone?" The concern in his voice was genuine, touching something deep within her. "I've managed for 3 years on my own." "I know." He looked at her directly now. "You're remarkably capable, Amelia Vance, but no one should have to be that strong all the time." The words hung between them, loaded with implications neither was quite ready to voice. Amelia looked away, focusing on the glowing embers of the fire. "And what about you?" she deflected. "Back to your 7 children and your ranch." "Yes," he said simply, "though it won't be the same." "Because of the rustlers, because of you." The directness of it startled her. She looked up to find his blue eyes watching her intently. "I don't understand," she said, though part of her did the part that had been increasingly aware of him, not just as a wounded man or as the father of 7, but as Beau Drummond, who looked at her as if he saw something valuable. "I think you do," he replied gently. "In a very short time you've become important to me, Amelia. I didn't expect that, didn't look for it." He gave a soft, wondering laugh. "God knows I have complications enough in my life." 7 of them, she agreed with a small smile. 7 wonderful complications, he corrected. "But the point stands, I wasn't looking for this, whatever this is between us." Amelia's heart thudded uncomfortably. "We've been through an intense experience together. It's natural to feel a connection." "Is that all it is to you, just circumstance?" She hesitated, honesty warring with self-preservation. "No," she admitted finally. "It's more. But it's also complicated, Beau. You have a ranch, children who need you. I have my homestead. We live very different lives." "Lives that could intersect," he suggested quietly. The possibility hung in the air between them, too new and fragile to examine closely. Amelia found herself both drawn to it and terrified by it. "Let's get your cattle home first," she said finally. "One challenge at a time," he nodded, accepting her caution. "Fair enough." "But this conversation isn't over, Amelia Vance." "I wouldn't expect it to be, Beau Drummond," she replied with a smile that he returned, creating a moment of warmth in the cool night air. The remainder of the journey passed without incident. As they drew closer to Beau's ranch, Amelia found herself increasingly curious, and if she was honest, anxious. What would his home be like? What would his children think of this stranger who had helped their father? On the afternoon of the 3rd day, they crested a rise overlooking a broad, surprisingly green valley. A substantial ranch house stood near a creek that sparkled in the sunlight, surrounded by outbuildings, corrals, and fenced pastures. Several smaller structures, bunkhouses, perhaps, or storage dotted the property. It was larger and more established than Amelia had imagined. "Welcome to Drummond Ranch," Beau said with unmistakable pride. "Not bad for a place everyone said was too dry to support cattle, is it?" "It's beautiful," Amelia said honestly. "How did you make it work where others failed?" Beau pointed toward the creek. "Underground springs. This valley has water year-round, even in drought years. Most folks didn't bother to look deeper than the surface." As they drove the cattle down toward the ranch, figures appeared from the house and outbuildings, first a few, then more, rushing toward them with obvious excitement. Amelia could make out children of various ages, led by a small girl who ran ahead of the others, despite the calls of an older woman trying to keep up with her. Beau's face transformed at the sight, years seeming to fall away despite his exhaustion and injuries. He urged his horse forward, leaving the others to manage the herd. Amelia watched as he dismounted, somewhat awkwardly due to his injuries, and swept the small girl Grace, she presumed, into his arms. The other children surrounded him, all talking at once in a joyful cacophony. Harvey nudged his horse alongside Amelia's. "That's what it's all about," he said, nodding toward the reunion. "Everything he does for them." Amelia nodded, feeling suddenly like an outsider witnessing something intensely private. Perhaps sensing her discomfort, Harvey added, "He'll want to introduce you. You saved more than cattle, Mrs. Vance." As the herd was guided into corrals by ranch hands who came to assist, Amelia dismounted and stood uncertainly at the edge of the family gathering. Beau, still surrounded by his children, looked up and caught her eye. With a word to the others, he made his way toward her, limping slightly but smiling. "Come meet my family," he said warmly, offering his hand. Amelia allowed him to lead her to where the children waited with curious expressions. The older woman, presumably Mrs. Gunderson, eyed her with open speculation. "Everyone," Beau announced, "this is Mrs. Amelia Vance. She saved my life, helped get our cattle back, and is the reason I'm standing here today." His hand rested lightly on her shoulder, a gesture not lost on the observant older children. "Amelia, you've already met Daniel. This is Michael, Sarah, and Samuel, Emma, Joshua, and this little one is Grace." Each child greeted her with varying degrees of politeness and curiosity. Grace, the youngest, hid behind her father's leg but peeked out with huge blue eyes, her father's eyes that studied Amelia intently. "And this is Mrs. Gunderson, who keeps us all in line," Beau concluded. The older woman stepped forward, assessing Amelia with a direct gaze. "Thank you for bringing him home," she said simply but with genuine feeling. "You must stay for supper at least," Michael, the second oldest, insisted. "Pa can tell us the whole story." Before Amelia could respond, Beau swayed slightly beside her. Only her quick hand on his arm kept him upright. "Your father needs rest before any storytelling," she said firmly. "He's been pushing himself too hard with these injuries." "Injuries?" Mrs. Gunderson's eyebrows shot up. "What haven't you told us, Beau Drummond?" "It's nothing serious," he tried to downplay it, but Amelia was having none of it. "Gunshot wound to the shoulder and another to the leg," she informed the housekeeper. "The shoulder's healing well, but he reopened it during our recovery of the cattle. The leg is more recent, just a graze, but he needs it cleaned and rebandaged." Mrs. Gunderson took immediate charge. "Inside, all of you. Michael, help your father. Daniel, see to Mrs. Vance's horse. Sarah, put water on to boil. The rest of you, stay out from underfoot." The efficiency with which the family responded to these instructions impressed Amelia. Even the younger children seemed to understand their roles in this well-orchestrated household. The interior of the ranch house surprised her even more. It was spacious and well-maintained, with a large central room dominated by a stone fireplace. Handmade furniture crafted with skill and care filled the space. Shelves lined with books covered one wall, while family portraits and children's drawings adorned another. It felt lived in and loved, despite the lack of a mother's touch for the past 2 years, as Mrs. Gunderson tended to Beau's injuries, clucking disapprovingly at the state of his bandages. Amelia found herself surrounded by curious children. "Did you really shoot a rustler?" Joshua asked with 7-year-old bloodthirstiness. "Did Pa really get shot twice?" Emma wanted to know. "Are you staying for dinner? Can you stay longer? Do you like children?" These rapid-fire questions came from Sarah, the more outgoing of the twins. Amelia answered as best she could, struck by the children's lack of shyness and their evident happiness despite the hardships they'd faced. It was a testament to Beau's parenting and, she suspected, to Mrs. Gunderson's steady influence. Dinner was a lively affair, with Beau rested and freshly bandaged recounting a somewhat edited version of their adventure. Amelia noticed he downplayed the dangers while emphasizing her role in the successful recovery of the cattle. The children listened with rapt attention, occasionally interrupting with questions or exclamations. "So Mrs. Vance is a hero," Samuel concluded solemnly when the tale was done. "Yes, she is," Beau agreed, his eyes meeting Amelia's across the table with warmth that brought color to her cheeks. As the evening progressed, Amelia found herself increasingly drawn into the family dynamic. She helped the older girls clear the table, admired Joshua's collection of interesting rocks, and was persuaded by Grace to read a bedtime story. The little girl, initially shy, had warmed to Amelia quickly and now sat trustingly in her lap as she turned the pages of a well-worn fairy tale. When the youngest children had been tucked into bed and the older ones had retreated to their own rooms or chores, Amelia found herself alone with Beau on the front porch. The night was clear, stars brilliantly visible above the valley. From somewhere in the distance came the low lowing of cattle the recovered herd, safe in their new home. "They're wonderful children," Amelia said softly. "They like you," Beau replied. "Grace especially. She doesn't warm to strangers easily. She's precious." Amelia's voice held a wistfulness she couldn't quite hide. Beau studied her in the moonlight. "You're thinking about what might have been, with your husband." Amelia nodded, then admitted, "Though lately, I've been thinking more about what might yet be." The words hung between them, loaded with possibility. Beau moved closer, his hand finding hers on the porch railing. "Stay," he said simply. "Not just tonight, stay longer, get to know us, all of us." "Beau," she began, uncertainty clear in her voice, "your life is here. Mine is back at my homestead." "Is it really, though?" he challenged gently. "Is that small plot of land truly your life, Amelia, or just the place you've been existing since John died?" The directness of the question startled her, but she couldn't deny the truth in it. Her homestead had become as much a prison as a home in recent years, a place she maintained out of duty and habit rather than love. "I don't know what you're offering," she said carefully. "Time," he answered. "Time to see if what's growing between us is real or just the result of extraordinary circumstances. Time for my children to know you and you them." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "I'm not asking for promises yet, Amelia, just time." The reasonableness of the request, coupled with her own reluctance to return immediately to her solitary existence, swayed her. "A week," she conceded. "I can stay a week." His smile was worth any uncertainty the decision caused her. That week stretched into 2, then a month. Amelia sent word to neighbors near her homestead to check on things, but found herself increasingly integrated into life at Drummond Ranch. She helped Sarah learn to bake bread, assisted Daniel with his reading, taught Emma how to identify medicinal plants, and spent countless hours with Grace, whose attachment to her grew stronger by the day. Mrs. Gunderson, initially reserved, warmed to Amelia as she proved her worth around the household. "You've got away with those children," the older woman observed one afternoon as they prepared dinner together. "Almost like you were meant to be here." The remark struck deep. Amelia had been thinking the same thing with increasing frequency. She felt useful here, needed in a way she hadn't for years. And then there was Beau, Their relationship had developed slowly, respectfully. Long conversations after the children were in bed, occasional rides together to check on the herd, shared laughter over the day's events, all building a foundation stronger than their dramatic first meeting. Beau was careful not to press her, but Amelia could see in his eyes what he hoped for. One evening, nearly 2 months after her arrival, they walked along the creek that ran through the property. The summer heat was giving way to autumn crispness, and the cottonwoods along the water were just beginning to turn gold. "I need to go back," Amelia said suddenly, "to my homestead. At least to check on things properly." Beau nodded, though she saw the flash of concern cross his face. "Of course, I'll send Daniel with you." "That's not necessary. I made the journey alone many times before I met you." "Humor me," he said with a small smile. Besides, the boy could use some time away from his brothers. Amelia agreed, knowing it would ease his mind. They continued walking, the conversation turning to plans for the coming winter, the cattle that would need to be sold before the first snow, the supplies that must be laid in. "You speak as if you'll be here," Beau observed carefully. "For the winter, I mean." Amelia stopped walking, turning to face him directly. "I've been avoiding making that decision. I know." His voice was gentle, "and I've been trying not to pressure you. It's a big step, Beau, for all of us." He took her hands in his. "Amelia, these past weeks have been the happiest this ranch has seen since Elizabeth died. The children adore you. Mrs. Gunderson gets actual rest because you shoulder so much of the load, and I—" He paused, his eyes intense in the fading light. "I find myself looking for you in every room, listening for your voice, wanting to share every thought that crosses my mind." Amelia's heart raced at the naked emotion in his words. "I feel the same," she admitted, "but there are practical considerations. Such as—" "I can't bear children, Beau," she confessed, the words tumbling out before she could reconsider them. "With John, we tried for years. The doctor in Moab eventually told me it was unlikely I ever would. You already have 7. You don't need a wife who can't give you more." For a moment, Beau looked startled. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled, a warm, genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "I already have 7, he said simply. 7 wonderful, exhausting, demanding children who need a mother's love far more than I need more mouths to feed." The relief that flooded through Amelia was so profound that tears sprang to her eyes. "You're certain, Amelia Vance," Beau said solemnly. "I fell in love with your courage, your kindness, your stubborn independence. I love the way you handle a rifle, bandage a wound, and read bedtime stories. The fact that you can't bear children doesn't change any of that." He brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "If anything, it means you're choosing my children, all 7 of them, knowingly and willingly. That makes your love even more precious." "I haven't said I love you," she pointed out, though her voice trembled with emotion. "Don't you?" he challenged gently. Instead of answering with words, Amelia rose on tiptoe and kissed him. It was their first kiss, sweet and certain and full of promise. When they parted, both were smiling. "I'll take that as a yes," Beau murmured. "Yes to the love," Amelia clarified. "As for the rest, let me go back to my homestead first, make sure, tie up loose ends." "Fair enough," he agreed, "but know that we'll be here waiting for your return." 2 days later, Amelia rode out with Daniel toward her homestead. The journey was uneventful, but as they approached the small house and yard, Amelia was struck by how diminished it all looked. The garden she'd tended so carefully was overgrown, the house dusty and still. It felt like a place from another life, which, in many ways, it was. She spent 3 days setting things in order, making lists of possessions to keep or give away, visiting neighbors to thank them for checking on the property. Daniel helped with repairs and heavier work, his presence a constant reminder of the family waiting for her decision. On the 3rd night, as they prepared for an early departure the next morning, Daniel broached the subject directly. "Are you coming back with me to stay, Mrs. Vance?" Amelia looked around the small cabin, clean now but empty of life. Her husband had died here, and in many ways she had stopped living here too, existing in a kind of limbo. It had served its purpose, sheltering her through grief and solitude, but it was no longer home. "Yes," she said, the certainty of it settling comfortably in her chest. "Yes, I'm coming back to stay." Daniel's grin was infectious. "Pa will be pleased, so will the others. Especially Grace, she asks for you every night at bedtime." They left at dawn, Amelia's most cherished possessions packed in trunks loaded on a borrowed wagon. The rest she had given to neighbors or left with the property, which she would sell when they returned to Monticello for supplies. As they approached Drummond Ranch late the following day, Amelia saw figures waiting by the gate, all 7 children and Beau, watching the road anxiously. When they spotted the wagon, a cheer went up that carried across the valley. Beau lifted her down from the wagon seat, his eyes asking the question his lips didn't need to form. In answer, Amelia gestured to her trunks and belongings. "I've come home," she said simply, "if you'll have me." His kiss was answer enough, much to the delight of the children, who surrounded them with hugs and exclamations of joy. Even Mrs. Gunderson, watching from the porch, dabbed suspiciously at her eyes. They were married 2 weeks later in Monticello, with the entire family present. The ceremony was simple, the celebration afterward joyful. As promised, Amelia sold her homestead, using the modest proceeds to add books to the ranch's library and fabric for new curtains and quilts, transforming the house in small ways that made it truly theirs. Winter came early that year, but found the Drummond household well prepared and happier than it had been in years. Amelia took to motherhood as if she'd been born to it, her love for the children growing deeper with each passing day. Beau watched in wonder as his family, fractured by Elizabeth's death, became whole again in unexpected ways. Spring brought new calves, summer new prosperity as the recovered herd increased their fortunes. By fall, plans were underway to expand the ranch house to accommodate their growing needs. And through it all, Amelia and Beau's love deepened, rooted in mutual respect, shared purpose, and genuine affection. On the anniversary of their first meeting that fateful day when a wounded cowboy had arrived bleeding on her doorstep, Beau presented Amelia with a gift, a silver locket containing miniature portraits of all 7 children. "For the mother who chose us," the inscription read. "I never thought I'd have this," Amelia admitted that night as they sat on the porch watching the stars, the sound of children's laughter filtering through the open windows behind them. "A family, a home that's truly alive. And I never thought I'd find love twice in one lifetime," Beau replied, his arm around her shoulders. "Life has strange turns indeed." "The best kind of strange," she agreed, leaning into his embrace. In the years that followed, the legend of how Beau and Amelia Drummond met became a favorite family story, told and retold on special occasions. How a widow with a barren womb and a widower with 7 children found in each other exactly what they needed. How love could build families in unexpected ways. How sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as tragedy. And though Amelia never bore children of her own, she was mother in every way that mattered to the 7 souls who had claimed her heart that summer day in 1875, and to the many grandchildren who eventually followed, all of whom grew up knowing the remarkable story of how their family began.